He is a computer scientist, a number theorist, a noted advocate for civil liberties on the internet, and a noted critic of intelligent design. He is a professor of mathematics at Waterloo, and is particularly active on the abuses of mathematics occurring in ID, creationism, and other pseudosciences. He has an Erdős number of 1 from a joint publication with Paul Erdős in 1991 concerning angle expansion. So please welcome Steph Shallit.
And thank you to CFI and particularly the Watsons for having invited me and for doing all the arrangements. So I'm going to talk about numerology, and I'm a mathematician, so I like numbers, but we'll see that numbers play as much a part in some kinds of pseudoscience as bad biology and bad climate science. My personal website is there, and you can also look at my blog if you're interested, and don't hesitate to send me questions. Let's see if this works. Okay, so what is numerology? So by numerology, if you look at a dictionary, you'll see something like the study of the supposed mystical significance of numbers and their effects on human life. But in my personal dictionary, you would see a slightly different definition. It would be silly number-based pseudoscience espoused by quacks and charlatans. So just to give an example, here's our favorite strange person. Anybody recognize this person? Farrakhan, right. So here's what he said in a speech in 1995. This was the Million Man March, I think. He says, "There in the middle of this mall is the Washington Monument, 555 feet high. But if we put a 1 in front of that 555 feet, we get 1555, the year that our first fathers landed on the shores of Jamestown, Virginia as slaves." Well, actually it was 1619, but let's not let that get in the way of anything. In the background is the Jefferson and Lincoln Memorial. Each one of these monuments is 19 feet high. Abraham Lincoln, the 16th president, Thomas Jefferson, the 3rd president, and 16 and 3 make 19 again. What is so deep? What is so deep about this number 19? Why are we standing on the Capitol steps today? That number 19, when you have a 9, you have a womb that is pregnant. And when you have a 1 standing by the 9, it means there's something secret that has to be unfolded. Well, I think at this point, even Farrakhan's most fervent admirers were sort of staring at each other and saying, what the heck is he going on about? But in fact, this kind of numerology is common in some parts of Islam. I thought I had another slide, but maybe not. So just to go on, in the talk, you'll see some of the common features of this kind of numerology that I'm talking about. The first is the disregarding or mixing of units. So here we had years, and we also had feet. So, if you take an introductory physics class, one of the very first things you learn is that you can't add or compare things that have different units. So why should years have anything to do with feet? The other is this dependence on base 10 representation. So a number is a number. It's not its base 10 representation. 2, in base 2, it's written as 1, 0, but that doesn't mean it's 10. It's the particular base we choose to represent numbers is not the number itself. Now there is the focus of the shape of the number when written. So, you have 19, the 9 is the womb, the pregnant woman. Well, that's because we choose to write it that way, but what if we write it as IX? Then presumably it's a railroad crossing next to a knife. Insignificant coincidences are elevated. This is a so-called law of small numbers, and I'll come back to that. Another is assignment of meanings to specific numbers. So 13 is unlucky. A lot of hotels don't have a 13th floor because people don't want to stay there. Another is the use of invented units. So when we measure things, if they don't come out the way we want, we just make up a new thing. The pyramid inch. And we measure everything that, and that's where the deep secrets of the numbers will be revealed. Other is tweaking the results. If they don't come out exactly right, according to your numerological scheme, you just tweak it a little bit. And finally, a lot of these things are just simply unfalsifiable. So here's my, going back to Islam, here's the Quran. This is a guy named Rashid Khalifa who died for his numerology. He was assassinated by Muslims who were incensed at his proposal that part of the Quran should be removed because it didn't match up with his numerology. He observed that the Quran has 6 times 19 chapters. It has 334 times 19 verses, and that gives you 6346. And if you add up the digits of 6346, you get 19. It has 17,324 times 19 letters. This Basmala invocation, I don't know anything about it. It has 19 letters in Arabic. The first word in this invocation appears 19 times in the Quran, and so on and so on. And he was convinced that by understanding the properties of 19, you would understand God's word as revealed in the Quran. So this kind of stuff, we want to take a historical approach to it. Who's to blame, ultimately, for this kind of nonsense? And I think we can place the blame squarely on the Pythagoreans. So I used to think Pythagoras was this great guy who discovered the Pythagorean theorem. You remember that from junior high school? Not true. Probably wasn't invented by Pythagoras. But one thing we know that he did do, and his cult did, was they elevated the numbers to this mystical status. Here you can't have a conference unless you start it with a prayer. So let's read that. Bless us, divine number, who generatest gods and men. O holy Tetractys, that's this thing, that contains the root and source of the eternally flowing creation. For the divine number begins with a profound pure unity until it comes to the holy four. And then it begets the mother of all, the all-comprising, all-bounding, the firstborn, the never-swerving, the never-tiring, Holy 10, the key holder of all. So they were really into 4, and if you make a triangle like you see there with a base and then 4 rows, you get 10, which was the never-tiring Holy 10. Okay, well, so for the Pythagoreans, numbers could be divided into male and female, and as usual, the females got the boring even numbers. The males got the cool and virile odd numbers, especially the primes. Those were the most virile of all. And then marriage was a combination of the virile 3 and the effeminate 2, and that's how you get 5 is marriage. So that's the kind of stuff that they like to indulge in. Well, there's a lot of number-based pseudoscience when it comes to religion. Islam is not the only culprit. Let's not forget our favorite 666 from Revelation. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. So, we know the Godwin's rule. Can't have a good discussion unless our favorite evil person comes along, Hitler. So let's code Hitler with A as 100 and B as 101 and so forth. And what do we find? The numbers add up to 666. So clearly he was foretold in the Bible. Now, you can play this game with lots of different calculations. So there's our other favorite Antichrist. I've already forgotten his name. What is it again? Mitt something or other. Well, and there's our current Muslim president. So this is the computer age. So we really should be coding these things not with 100 and 101. We should use ASCII, or I suppose Unicode if you're cool, but I was born in 57, so ASCII, and A is 97, B is 98, and so forth. And we do this with Romney. What do we discover? It is 666. So clearly, he was the Antichrist. Well, with Obama, we could code it in a different way. Let's say 106, 107. I was trying to think of a funny reason why this should be the case. Maybe someone can tell me. But I couldn't. And when we do that, we discover that Barack is also 666. So actually, it was a choice between two demons there in the election. Well, you can play this game in a lot of ways. I mean, you're not confined to this. Here's another one is, let's just code the ordinary way. A is 1, B is 2, C is 3. And then Barack adds up to 181. But never fear, we can still beastify him. After all, the American political system, there's a couple of numbers that were really important in the last election. There was 435, number of people in the House of Representatives. 50, the number of states. Ha! All you have to do is add those, and you discover that he was really the devil in disguise. With Romney, you just need to add 435. So, yeah. Well, we shouldn't be too smug. We find this kind of numerology in a lot of different areas. It's not just religion. Even in the sciences, it sometimes invades. Anybody know who that guy is? I know I'm going to stump most of you with this one. Who is that? Anyone know? No. This is Muhammad El-Nashi. He is the editor, or was the editor, of a journal called Chaos, Solitons, and Fractals. And this is a journal that was a subject of some controversy, and his tenure there was some subject of controversy because not only was he the editor-in-chief, he also published many, many articles in this journal. And some of these articles were alleged to have rather poor content. So let's take a look at one of his articles. He was eventually forced out. But the Hausdorff dimension of the Menger sponge is given by, and then log of 20 over log of 3, which of course everyone knows is 2.7268, about. Note that the Kobe temperature of microwave background ratio, that's what it really says, is found to be 2.726 K. So here he's making the mistake that we teach in our introductory physics class. He's taking a unitless number, which is the quotient of two logarithms, and y20 and y3, and saying that this has something to do with something that's measured in Kelvin, which is a completely arbitrary temperature scale. If we measured it in Fahrenheit or Celsius, we'd get something entirely different. And yet this was published. So he was eventually forced out. There was a libel suit involving Nature, and a big stink. You can read about it on the internet. Well, he wasn't the first. Arthur Eddington. He's a physicist, British physicist who worked in the early part of the 20th century. And he thought that there was this constant, which is known to physicists as alpha. He thought that this constant was exactly 1 over 136. And from this, he constructed a rather elaborate argument that the number of protons in the universe was exactly 136 times 2 to the 256. Well, the only problem was that measurements of the fine structure constant weren't so good back in the 30s, and they've improved through time. Now we know it to something like 8 or so decimal places. And then later on, he discovered that it was actually exactly 137. So that's the fudge factor, changing your belief that the numbers dictate it just as the new evidence comes in. And in fact, today's best estimate is that it's about 1 over 137.035999. Oh, there's 3 nines there. I guess you got to explain that somehow. Okay, well, we can go back even further. Bode's law. How many people remember Bode's law? I learned it in high school. I learned it in grammar school, so this would have been in the 60s. So there's Bode. And what did Bode's law say? Well, it said, if you look at the distances of planets from the sun, then these are closely related to powers of 2. So we write down the powers of 2, except Mercury, we inexplicably write down 0, which is not a power of 2, instead of a half, but it's okay. Then what we do is we take these powers of 2 and we multiply them by 3, and then we add 4 and divide by 10, and that gives the distance in astronomical units. So Jupiter multiplied by 3, 3 times 16 is 48, add 4, 4 divided by 10, 5.2, and you can see it's actually fairly close. So there's some reasonably good agreement for some things, and then Pluto came along and destroyed everything. So at the time, this was considered to be something rather profound about the way solar systems were built, or at least the way our solar system was built, that it would obey this kind of exponential rule. Never mind that, you had to special case Mercury to 0 instead of a half, and you had to multiply the power of 2 by something and add 4, why 4? This was still thought to be something really, crucial. And people have even invented theories as to why planet distances should be roughly exponentially distributed. But I think now it's more or less viewed as simply a curiosity. We don't necessarily expect that the new planetary systems that we're discovering will be distributed anything like this. Okay. The face on Mars. That's another favorite of crackpot astronomers. So you might know of a guy named Richard Hoagland, who, when he saw pictures from Viking in 1976, he came across this very interesting thing. And I don't know about you, but sure, it looks like a face. I got to admit it. And from this, he constructed a very elaborate astronomical scenario in which ancient civilizations created great monuments on Mars. And too bad for him that the latest pictures from Mars make it pretty clear that it's not a face. It's just like a mesa. It doesn't really look at all like a face anymore once you look at it with better resolution. Part of the reasons we thought it looked like a face was just that the resolution wasn't very high. Well, if you go and look at his book, The Monuments of Mars, it's a fascinating bit of kind of crackpot astronomy. It makes really good bedtime reading, I find. You see that a lot of his argument was based on numerology. So he went and he found the face there on Mars, and from this face he found, there's something that looks like it has regular sides. This must be some monument that the Martians built. And he found other things all nearby, and then he started drawing lines between them, and then he started measuring the angles of them, and said, see, if you look at the angle A here, then it's 60 degrees. That's pi over 3. The tangent is square root of 3. If you measure this angle C, you find that the sine of it is E over pi. And only an advanced civilization would have made these monuments and had the angles between them have a tangent of E over pi. Well, okay, perhaps. But the problem is that a lot of these supposed identifications of numbers are completely spurious. Like, look at F, which is supposed to be 49.6. Well, the tangent of F, he claimed, was pi over E. It's not even close. I mean, at least not to me. So a lot of this stuff is just invented coincidences. It's making a large data set and then just trying to fit it to anything you can. The Bible codes. These were discovered by 3 Israeli scientists, so only 2 of which I've been able to find pictures of. So the third one is Yoav Rosenberg. The first 2 are Doran Witztum and Elihu Rips. But in the place of Rosenberg, I do have a picture of the code there. So what they propose is if you take the text of the Hebrew Bible and you write it down, here's an English example, where all the letters are just run together, and then you look at a linearly indexed subsequence of the letters, like look at every 10th letter, every 27th letter, and so forth, and read it in some way, either backwards or forwards, you find things you would not expect to find. Like here we find Bible code in the text of the Bible. So in particular, they published a paper where they said they found the names of famous rabbis in the Hebrew Bible much more than you could possibly expect by chance. Now, I don't know about you, but if I wanted to be impressed, like the names of famous rabbis, a lot of them don't spring to my lips, Now, if they had found baseball players, we would have been really, much more impressed. But this was later just found to be utter nonsense. And they actually published a paper. The journal said, we're publishing it. We don't know why this is true. It seems to be statistically correct. We don't have an explanation for it. And they said, we're just publishing it as a puzzle. Well, this puzzle was taken up by a variety of people, and they figured out that the problem was there was a lot of wiggle room. If you're looking for the name of a rabbi, rabbis typically have multiple names. Maimonides is known as Rambam and things like this. And there's multiple ways you could put down the rabbi's name. And once you get this wiggle room, then by choosing the right appellation, you can make things appear much more than chance. And that's a typical kind of numerology where you're hoping to get a particular result and you tweak the results a little bit to get what you want. Well, there's even numerology in my area, in mathematics. So here's a favorite one. This is a subject of an article by Martin Gardner in his Mathematical Games column in Scientific American, kind of a hoax. E to the pi root 163. Is that an integer? Well, it sure looks like it. And if you calculate the first 20 or 25 digits, you find a string of nines. Well, but it's not an integer. It's just really close. Now here's an example where there really is a reason behind it. There's a deep reason behind it. It involves something called the class number, which we study in number theory. And so you can explain this. It's part of a more general theory that explains why this is the case and also predicts it will happen for other similar kinds of numbers. But on the other hand, if we look at e to the pi minus pi, well, that's really close to 20. Look at that, 19.999099. Is that a coincidence, or is there some deep reason behind it? Well, as far as we know, it is just a coincidence. We don't have any deep theory that explains that and predicts it to occur in other similar kinds of numbers. Well, there's this thing called the law of small numbers, and that explains a lot of these kinds of coincidences. The law of small numbers was invented by Richard Guy, and he said, there aren't enough small numbers to meet the many demands of them. Or in other words, superficial similarities spawn spurious statements. Now, this is saying that when you're trying to analyze the properties of numbers, you have lots and lots of properties and very few small numbers. And so a lot of those small numbers are going to get hit with lots of properties, and that's just coincidence. So here's an example. This actually came up in my own research. Take the number 8 times 13 raised to the I power plus 183. So if I is 1, this would be 8 times 13, or 104, plus 183, so that would be 287. And the question is that ever a prime? Well, it's not true for I equal 1. It's not true for I equal 2. It's not true for I equal 3. We went up to 32,019, and then at 32,020, it's a prime. So if you only saw the first 30,000, you might say, hey, this is never a prime number. There must be something deep reason behind it. And the answer is no. There's just lots of things you could multiply and raise to powers, and some of them are going to be prime for a long time. Some of them are not going to be prime for a long time. Well, you would think of all the places where numerology would never infect it would not be literature. I don't know anything numerology in manga, but maybe Sarah can tell us about it sometime. There's a book by a scholar named Alistair Fowler. He wrote a whole book about it, published by Oxford University Press, if I remember right. He wrote it while he was at the Institute for Advanced Study, so he was considered a serious literary scholar. And he invented this numerological argument about Shakespeare's sonnets, that Shakespeare's sonnets somehow hide in them some magical numerical pattern. So Shakespeare wrote 154 sonnets, of which numbers 99, 126, and 145 are not the regular sonnets with a normal rhyme form. So why those? Well, Fowler said it was because if you make a triangle with 154 at the top, then these numbers are evenly spaced along the left side, and that explains it. Well, just one little problem. Notice something about that row there? There's a number missing. Well, that's because the pattern doesn't appear unless that number's missing. So he constructed an elaborate argument why that number should be omitted from the triangle. So this is the kind of, the typical nonsense where you're looking for a pattern, you become sure it's there, and then you start disregarding evidence or manipulating the evidence to make sure that it really is there. So to eschatology, I guess that was the subject of this conference. I haven't heard too much about it yet, but there's a guy named Basil Stewart. He wrote a book called The Great Pyramid. He predicted the end of the world too. And here's the book. I got it out of the library. It's a really amazing work. Again, very good bedtime reading. He said that the pyramid encodes in it the history of the world and also stuff about the Bible. And based on this, he very confidently predicted that the end of the world would occur in May 29th to 30th, 1928. Well, unfortunately, it didn't, so he needed a new edition, and then he predicted it would be September 15th, 1936. And then a new edition came out, it would be August 20th, 1953, and I think now, today, this is not taken very seriously for obvious reasons. Harold Camping is one of our favorite evangelists who was predicting the end of the world, and he explained it as follows. He said, well, Christ hung on the cross in April 1, 33 AD, and you go from April 1 of 33 AD to April 1 of 2011 AD, and that's 1978 years, and now you just multiply that by the length of the year, 365.2422, and that gives you the number of days. And then April 1 to May 21, which is when he thinks the end of the world will be, that's 51. So you add 51 to that, and you get 722,500. Well, not really. He's off, as usual. And then that number is a square. 722,500 is a square, so it's 5 times 10 times 17 squared. And that means 5 means atonement, and 10 means completeness, and 17 means heaven. So that says he just about fell off his chair when he realized that. Well, so did I, actually. So that's why the end of the world was going to end on May 21, 2011. Needless to say, it didn't. To me, it seems really obvious that numerology is nonsense. And for the reasons I said, it confuses units, it can't be falsified. But, whenever you want a reliably stupid voice, you can turn to a philosopher. Sorry about that. I hope Udo is not in the audience. David Stove, he's also known for being an opponent of evolution. He said, no one actually knows even what is wrong with numerology. Philosophers, of course, use numerology as a stock example of thought gone hopelessly wrong, and they are right to do so. Still, they can't tell you what's wrong with it. If you ask a philosopher, the best he will be able to come up with is a bit of positivism about unverifiability or a bit of pauperism about unfalsifiability, answers which the philosopher himself will know to be unsatisfactory. And then he goes on to say, numerology, in addition to this defect, they put numerology in the same boat as astrology. But numerology is actually quite as different from astrology as astrology is from astronomy. Well, how about the fact that there's just absolutely no reason to believe it? There's not a single good reason to think that thinking of the year as 1555 and removing the 1 is going to tell you anything interesting about the height of the Washington Monument. So that's why I'm not a philosopher. Now, numerology, you can find it in lots of places. You can find it in the library. If you look up the Dewey Decimal Code for algebra, it's 512, and every number theorist will immediately tell you, hey, that's a power of 2. That's kind of things we like to study. Dewey Decimal System code for numerology itself is 133.335. Anybody recognize that as anything interesting? Yeah, it's got 4 3s, but there's something demonic hiding there. Yeah, so if you add 133 to 335 reversed, you get 666. So for you, sir, I have a little prize which you can pass down all the way to the back. Okay, well, I want to finish off by trying to claim that numbers are like gods. Lots of people have a favorite one. My favorite is 43, and my favorite number is 17. There's no evidence they have any independent existence outside our minds. That's another way that numbers are like gods. There's no evidence they have the power to influence our lives. And so I'll stop by saying that there are probably no numbers, so stop worrying and enjoy your life. Thank you.